Ladies and gentlemen, something devastating has happened here today, and I do appreciate you coming to investigate. Hopefully you can spread the word as quickly as possible so we can find who committed these horrible crimes. I am Miss Sullivan, Miss Bridget Sullivan. I have been the Borden's maid for over 3 years. Poor Mr. and Mrs. Borden, I can't imagine who would want to do this to them. They've been so good to me. And poor Miss Emma and Miss Lizzie, how will they ever cope with their parents' deaths? They must be so heartbroken.
Oh, Miss Sullivan. Please do accept my condolences for what happened today.
Thank you.
And who are all these people?
And these are reporters.
Are they really?
They're investigating.
Well, they're going to help with the investigation. That's right. Marshal Hilly had mentioned that to me.
Let me start with this past Tuesday. Tuesday evening, Mr. and Mrs. Borden, Miss Lizzie and I all took ill. We have both been still feeling quite unwell ever since, and I don't know why. Miss Emma was fortunate that she was out of town visiting friends in Fairhaven. Mr. and Mrs. Borden were still well enough to go about their duties. Mrs. Borden had prepared the guest room upstairs for Mr. Morse before his arrival last evening. This morning I made breakfast for Mr. and Mrs. Borden before Mr. Borden and Mr. Morse went about on their appointments. I went out to the backyard at about 9 o'clock. I got sick. Before Miss Lizzie came down and said that she didn't want nothing for breakfast, she just wanted coffee and a cookie.
Now, also, she mentioned that John Morse had spent last night here in the house. I don't know if you know who John Morse is, but John Morse is actually the brother of the first Mrs. Borden.
After breakfast, Mrs. Borden asked me to wash the windows inside and out, so I went out to the barn to get a pail for water. I asked Miss Lizzie to lock the screen door, as we always keep the front door and the cellar doors locked. I washed the windows, I spoke to the Kelly maid next door for a bit. When I came back in at about 10:15, the screen door was still unlocked.
Still unlocked?
I'm still unlocked. At about 10:45, I heard Mr. Borden trying to get in the front door, trying to use his key. Sometimes it sticks, so I went to go help him, and I might have let go a bad word when I was trying to open the door, and I looked up the stairs and I saw Miss Lizzie laughing at me. Mr. Borden came in the house, he went up to his room, he came back down again, and I heard him ask Miss Lizzie where Mrs. Borden was. She had said that Mrs. Borden had received a note and went out to go visit a sick friend.
Now, did you have a chance to talk to either Mr. Borden or Lizzie after that?
I spoke with Miss Lizzie. She had told me that I should leave and go to Sergeant's Dry Goods down the street. They were having a sale on dress goods for 8 cents a yard. I was so tempted to go, but I was still feeling rather unwell, so I went up to the 3rd floor into my room and took a nap. Then I heard Miss Lizzie screaming up the steps for me to come down quickly. And that's when we found him. We found Mr. Borden on the sofa.
Sullivan. Miss Sullivan. Okay, try to continue yourself, okay? We know this is difficult for you. There's a lot of stress.
Miss Lizzie asked me to go fetch Mrs. Russell, her friend Miss Russell, down on Borden Street. So I went to Borden Street, I found Miss Russell, brought her back to comfort Miss Lizzie. Then the police came, and Miss Lizzie had asked me and Mrs. Churchill, the neighbor next door, to go upstairs and to see maybe if Mrs. Borden was still there. And that's when we found Mrs. Borden in the guest room. Oh, Mr. Coughlin, this is dreadful!
Miss Sullivan, have a seat. Relax.
Mr. Coughlin, I am Undertaker Mr. Winwood. I was hired especially by Miss Lizzie to clean and prepare the bodies for a funeral.
And you sir?
I'm Dr. Dolan. I'm the medical examiner for Bristol County. Mr. Woodward, I'm afraid it's going to be quite some time before we are ready for your services. I'm still waiting for Mr. Walsh to come down here and take some photographs of the crime scenes. And besides, I do plan on removing their stomachs and sending them to Dr. Wood at Harvard for testing.
Mr. Morse, you have to remember that it's an ongoing investigation, and your alibi, if it's corroborated, would sit a lot better than just you don't say so. And besides, I mean, you were a butcher by trade. Is it just a coincidence that you, being a butcher, we have 2 dead bodies in this house? 2 people who were, you might say, butchered to death? Mr. Morse?
The important word is was. I was a butcher. I now only farm and trade in livestock. You know, I don't care for your attitude at all, Mr. Coughlin. It has been many years since I have butchered livestock.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Please be careful around the scene. Don't want any contamination. And as you see in front of us, here is the body of Abby Borden. We do feel that she was probably murdered around 9:30 this morning.
What's that, sir?
Well, we can tell by the way the blood is congealed. So anyhow, we feel she was over the bed, tucking in the sheets and doing everything. And we definitely took notice she had one big blow to the one side of her face, her left side, which kind of tells us she turned and looked at her attacker. Then took the hatchet, wherever it was, stood over the body like this, and repeatedly hit her in the back of the head several times.
Well, Miss Lizzie, I understand that at the time of your father's murder, you were in the barn looking for tin to fix a screen door. Is that correct?
Yes, your notes are correct, Detective.
Thank you. And where were you when your mother was murdered?
Well, first of all, Mrs. Borden was my stepmother, not my mother. My mother died when I was 2. And if it was around 9:30 this morning, as the officials have told me, I was more than likely in the dining room.
So how did it feel playing Mrs. Borden today on the day of the reenactment of the murders?
It actually did bother me to do that, and I even went off to the side by myself. And I spoke out loud to Abby, and I said, Abby, I'm very sorry for what happened to you, and you might not want to be up here today because you're probably not going to like what you're going to see today. And I told her I hope it didn't offend her. It was just meant to tell her a story. And I really did. I had that conversation because it did bother me.
So how did it feel today playing Emma on the day of the anniversary of the murders?
Exciting. I've been playing her for about 6 years now, and I don't know, she's kind of like my favorite character, I guess you could say, for the Borden crime.
Do you feel like you channel her at all when you play?
Sometimes I feel like I do because she is the older sister, and I have to be protective, so I always kind of try to keep my composure a little bit,
Do you feel like the activity in the house is more active on the day of the anniversary?
Oh, that's a good question. Sometimes it is. We had a group here last night, and we did a dowsing rod session and stuff, and we definitely got some answers, but surprisingly not from the Bordens, from people that were in the house. So I'd like to think that it spikes and they're maybe here more, but I don't know.
How did it feel playing Mr. Borden today on the day of the anniversary of the murders?
It was pretty cool. It felt like I was really being Andrew Borden.
She got him on the sofa when he went to take a snooze. I hope he went to heaven, because he wasn't wearing shoes. He rearranged his face with a hatchet, so they say. And she got her stepmom Abby in that same old-fashioned way. Oh, you can't shut your mama up in Massachusetts. But even if you're tired of her cuisine, you can't shut your mama up in Massachusetts. If you do, you know it sure to cause a scene. It wasn't done for pleasure, and it wasn't done for spite. It wasn't done because the lady wasn't very bright. She always did exactly what her mama and papa bid. When they told her, Lizzie, cut it out.
That's exactly what she did!